This time on the Families Matter Most podcast.
Instead of feeling upset, angry at our kids for being irresponsible, for leaving messes, for not doing their chores, we're going to help them to work on some of these things and help them to see that, you know what, they're not broken, they're not helpless, they're not worthless, they're not unlovable. They just have something to work on.
Every time Jen Dean speaks, I can see hope, knowledge, expertise, wisdom, and love.
When Jen Dean speaks about parenting, we make sure that we are there to listen because we know we will get valuable advice.
Families Matter Most with Jen Dean.
She doesn't just give skills for us to be better parents, but she teaches us how to reach our children's hearts. And at the end of the day, that's what truly matters.
Today in the podcast, I have an activity. This is a bit of a workshop today to help you help your kids grow their self-esteem. For this activity, you need a piece of paper and a pen. That's it. One for every kid. And I want you to draw a road down the page from top to bottom. So it's a road. So you're going to draw basically a giant column, a giant column down the middle of the page. So it's going to look like a road. And if you're super artsy, you can make a little dotted line, to make the lines in the middle of the road. You can make the white lines on the sides of the road. You can make ditches on either side of the road. Now, some of you know where I'm going with this if you've heard me talk about this before. We have a road going down the middle from the top to the bottom of our page, and then room for 2 ditches on either side. One for every kid. Let's start with 1. I want you to think about your child. Think about all the things that frustrate you about them. And I want you to write those things in the ditches. So on the sides of the roads, either side, I want you to write those things down. I decided to start with the things that frustrate us because those are easier to remember, aren't they? Think about the things that make you mad. Maybe they don't listen, the things they do wrong, the things they get in trouble over, the things you find yourself repeating. Maybe they lie. Maybe they have a pattern of lying. Maybe they argue and talk back. Maybe they have a habit of stealing. Maybe they ignore your instructions. Do they leave messes everywhere? They maybe refuse to accept a no answer from you. Are they angry? Do they stomp and slam doors? Do they hit? Do they fight? Are they yelling? Do they have temper tantrums? Are they super particular about, exactly where they want their things? And if anyone touches their stuff, they're really mad and upset. Do they have a problem sharing? Are they kind? How are they with empathy? Are they weak in that area? Are they not good about thinking of others' feelings? Maybe they're not responsible, right? They don't clean up after themselves. They forget your instructions. They always want to have fun. They never want to do the work. They never want to do the chores. It's always hard to get them to do the things. Maybe they're not good at spending time alone and they're constantly wanting you to entertain them. What is it? What is it that you struggle with them over? You can pause this and think about it, but I want you to write down all of their negative behaviors or character qualities in the ditches, all the things that frustrate you. Now, of course, don't show this to your kid, right? But for you and I want you to write this down. So pause this as you need to, and then come back to me. Perfect. So you've got some things in the ditches. These are the things that your child is struggling with. And I want to give you some more information. This might help you to think of a few more. I want to talk to you about the 3 lies. Now, I've talked about this in previous podcasts and we'll link to those. But I want to talk to you about the 3 lies. As I work with people, we tend to believe some lies about ourselves, about our life, and it affects us. It affects how we view the outside world. It helps us to take things personally when maybe we shouldn't. And it all comes back to how we feel about ourselves, about our own core identity. So here they are. The first one is I'm helpless. There's nothing I can do. It will never change. It will never get better. Does your child say things like that? I'll never be good at school. I'll never, right? It will never work. I'm no good. Do they sound like they think they're helpless? That might give you some more insight. So they feel helpless. Maybe that goes in the ditches too. The other lie, the second one, is I'm unworthy. I'm unworthy. I'm worthless. That's the lie. I'm worthless. So you know what, I'll never get it right because I'm worthless, because I'm not good enough, right? Because there's something wrong with me, because I'm broken. Do they believe something like that deep down? Do you think so? Do you hear them saying things like that? Like, I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough. That could be a mixture of worthless and helpless, right? But do you feel that way? That was my lie that I grew up fighting, was I'm worthless. And I used to get defensive if somebody was negative towards me or I felt rejected. I would fight back and I would say, you can't treat me that way. I'm not garbage. I'm not worthless. So that's a lie that affects everybody. Does it affect your kids? Can you hear that in their thoughts maybe? And the last one is I'm unlovable. They will not love me. They can't love me. There's something wrong with me that makes me unlovable. Nobody will love me. Do you hear that? Those are kind of the three lies as I'm working with people. One of them usually hits home. So even now, as I'm saying the three, helpless, worthless, unlovable, is there one that kind of feels like a knife in your heart? If so, that's probably your own lie. So part of this is figuring out maybe yours, but this exercise is trying to figure out which one your kids might be believing. And I have not met a family that didn't have, one of these lies at least for each kid. So it doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean you're a bad mom. We all have these things in our life. I think if you can try and discern which one or ones your kids are struggling with, write those in the ditches because we want to counteract those. Those are not the truth. It is a lie, but it feels true and we live out of that place. So now we have the ditches. These are the extremes. What I like to do is instead of feeling upset, angry at our kids for being irresponsible, for leaving messes, for not doing their chores, for example, we're going to help them to work on some of these things and not feel just like a failure. So I want you to look at all of the things that frustrate you in the ditches and look for some patterns. Look for some character qualities that are maybe misused. So maybe you see that, like I said earlier, you see that they're constantly leaving messes. They're not finishing an instruction. You ask them to clean their room and they start, but they don't finish. They have a hard time with diligence. They have a hard time with responsibility. So you could lump those in. So you could draw a circle or you could take a highlighter or a color and kind of, underline those words in the ditches because we can lump those together. And that would be a character issue in the realm of responsibility. You might look and also see that in the ditches, you've got some things written down there like mean to sister, mean to mom, hits, fights, yells, anger, tantrums. Those are all things to do with anger. Those are all things to do with kindness. So maybe we would categorize all of those together in a couple of different areas. So depending on your child, that could be we want them to work on kindness. That could be we want them to work on self-control. We want them to work on patience. And those things, right? Those are the character quality that is misused. So you're going to lump those together. And on the road, I want you to put the positive thing. So if you feel like your kid has a problem being irresponsible, on the road, I want you to write responsible. That is the positive character quality that we want. And when it goes off into the ditches, that's when it gets irresponsible. If you find that your child has an issue with self-control, they're not good. They are very impulsive. They react. They can fight, hit, bite, kick, yell, scream. They have a hard time with self-control. Then in the road, I want you to write self-control. And when it gets, into the ditches, that's when we have the impulse issues. That's when we find our kids are fighting and hating, when they don't have the self-control. You might find that, hey, there's a pattern here of meanness. So the character quality that we want there is kindness. So let's put kindness on the road. But I see that, okay, when it's in the ditch, that's when it's in meanness. So notice what we're doing here. We're taking your child's personality and we're trying to dial it back a little bit. Like, okay, you know what? You're super fun. You want to have fun all the time and you're constantly getting into trouble, but that's not going to help you. What you need though is to focus on doing what you're supposed to do. You need to focus on responsibility. So we're going to put that on the road. So hopefully I've described this well. On the road in your paper is the balance. That's the positive character qualities we want for our kids. And in the ditches are the negative ones. That's when we go off track. You see what I'm getting at here? We're off track when we're in the ditches. And what you can do is you can pick one. Maybe you don't want to show your kids all of them, depending on how full your page is. But maybe you pick one and you talk to your kids about that. And you say, okay, look, we got to stay on the road. And when we get off track, we end up hurting people. We end up being mean. We can hurt their feelings. We can cause damage to relationships. We can cause damage to our things. You know, when we get super angry and we're mad and we're throwing and hitting, we can break stuff in our house. You know, this is off track. We want to stay on the road and stay out of the ditch. What this does, when you can sit with your kid and help them to see that, you know what, they're not broken, they're not helpless, they're not worthless, they're not unlovable. They just have something to work on. What are they going to work on? You can have a mentor meeting with every single one of your kids, and you can show them this road, and you can say, hey, you know what? This is what you're going to work on now. I would pick one thing at a time. I would not show them this page you're doing right now. I would make a new one with one thing and say, hey, on the road is responsibility. That's what we're working on. That's what we're learning. Now with that, we want to make sure we stay out of the ditches. And for you, when you go in the ditch, when you go off track, it's when you're distracted. It's when something else comes up and you forget, you forget what you were working on and you leave a mess or you don't see it through. And then you get angry and upset when we ask you to do it. You have a hard time with responsibility. These are some of the areas that you get off into the ditch, but this is what we're going to work on. So what I'm hoping you see is we're stepping back from it and we're making it not a big emotional outburst from us that, you know, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get this? What's wrong with me? How come I can't teach them? My kid's not going to be responsible. They're not going to follow through in life. They're never going to finish anything. And it's going to be all my fault because I didn't teach them responsibility. That's where our brain can go, right? Instead, have the mentor meeting, pick one thing at a time and just normalize it. Normalize that in our life, we're always going to be working on something. And this is what you're going to work on. And your sister's going to work on something else. And your brother's going to work on something else. But we're all working on something. There's nothing wrong with you, right? There's nothing broken. You are not helpless. You are not worthless. You are so lovable. You can start speaking against those lies, even if you're not sure which one your child might be believing. You can start speaking positive, counteracting all three of them to try and build some positivity up for them, to help them to start working on it. Whether they even know it or not, you're helping them to overcome some of those lies that we all tend to grow up with. And you can help them work on one character quality at a time. It can be easy for us. I don't know. It was easy for me, especially if I was feeling negative, if I was mad at myself, or if I was feeling critical. I could just look at my kids sometimes and see everything wrong. I could see all the things they were doing wrong. They are not kind. They don't have empathy. They don't have any self-control. They're angry. They don't care about anyone. They're fighting all the time. My life is horrible. It's never going to get better. My kids are going to end up in a gang or in prison or sociopaths, right? I want you to try and stop that. What happens when we're in that place is, whether we mean to or not, it seems that we kind of leak that onto our kids. And we can say, oh, you're doing that again? Really? We can start being sarcastic. The hopelessness that we feel maybe about ourselves and our parenting can kind of drip onto them. And they can start to feel like they have so many things wrong with them. It's never going to get better. I don't think we ever mean to. It's not intentional. But we can give our kids this impression that, you know, they have so many things wrong with them. And they're not going to think that their parents are failures. They're going to think that they are failures. I've worked with kids who've said to me, like, I know I'm broken. I know I get in more trouble than my siblings. I know that I have issues. My parents yell at me all the time. I've worked with kids like that. I've worked with families. So it's not hopeless. You are not helpless, mom or dad. We can work on these things. thankfully, right? We can start now, wherever you're at. We can work on these things and grow. But I want you to pick one thing at a time. And I want you to have these conversations with your kids. Matter of fact, not when you're angry and yelling. Just say, hey, we're all working on something. You can even say, this is what I'm working on. I'm working on discipline in my own life. I'm working on reducing anger. I'm working on being more patient. I'm working on dealing with stress. You can even talk to them. You can make this for yourself and you can talk to them about what you're working on. I would love if we could normalize this for everyone. That if we're working on something, it doesn't mean we're broken. It means that we're human and we're all working on something. So I want you to manage your expectations. These are children. Even for your own self, you are a human being and you are not a robot. You can't just write code and change in an instant. It takes time. So pick one thing to work on. What if you could have a weekly mentor meeting with your kids? And you can say, okay, how's it going? How's it going? And I've noticed an improvement here in the area of anger. I've noticed there's been more kindness towards your sibling. I've noticed that there have been less frequent tantrums. I noticed you shared your toys the other day. You can give them real feedback to help them get out of the ditch and back onto the road. This has been a really great visual to help kids work on it, to normalize that we're all working on something, and to help them counteract those lies. They are not helpless, they are not worthless, and they are definitely lovable. So hopefully this helps. There's going to be links to more podcasts. This is an activity you can do, but if you've listened to other podcasts on the 3 lies or some of the other ones I'm going to link, it's going to help you to have more background. You might also really like the podcast that talks about having the weekly one-on-one meeting. This would be a great add-on to that. If you're currently doing that or wanting to do that, have a listen to that podcast. But I do want you to take care of yourself. Notice that there's no room for judgment here. There's no being critical. It's stepping back and saying, okay, what are we working on? We all have something, including you. And if you would like me to do that for you, if you are thinking, gee, I wish I had someone to meet with me every week or two to look at the things that I'm working on to help me get out of the ditch, that's exactly what I can do. Book a free strategy call. Let's talk about how to help you make this your best year yet.
Thanks for listening to the Families Matter Most podcast with Jen Dean, part of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. If you are interested in contacting Jen for one-on-one parent coaching, for speaking engagements, or just to get a little more information, please visit our website, familiesmattermost.com.